Hey guys, welcome back. I am Jason Salyer, and this is Mr. David Holladay, the legend of primitive skills. He's very, very humble about it, but I really admire him and look up to him as a mentor, and I've learned a ton from him in just the short amount of time that I've got to spend with him. I'm really grateful for that, and he's just kind of a wealth of knowledge, and he's very insightful in his views on just life in general. So anytime I can track you down and talk to you for a few minutes and then document it so I can share it with a lot more people, it's a big win for me.
Yeah.
So one question, I have two questions really primarily, but first question leading up to that is you've had involvement in making TV, movies, productions, big production stuff like Castaway and that kind of stuff. And if you could just real briefly talk about that, like what you've done in that area, and then my lead up question will be will come from that response.
Yeah, I really enjoyed working with Bill Broyles, who was the person who first called us about Tom Hanks, thinking that he'd like to do something that showed more acting skills and not just one flavor fits all movies type acting that was going on. He really loved Peter Sellers. Tom Hanks loves Peter Sellers, and so did Bill Broyles, and they were buddies. And so Peter Sellers could be a lot of people in one movie, and so could Dustin Hoffman. So those were two of Tom Hanks's mentors. Really loved their acting because they really acted rather than just being the same person.
Same character in every movie, yeah.
Right. So they didn't use their personality, they used their acting skills to try to bring out the character of things. And so Tom asked Bill, would you please make a movie that helps me be several people in one movie? So they come up with this idea of a guy that was a big corporate type dude who crashes and has to change his attitude and way of being in the wild and then comes back a better person, a more people-oriented person rather than a take their energy and climb the ladder type guy. Anyway, so we get this phone call and Westcott.
Why did they reach out to you?
Well, they'd heard that Boulder Outdoor Survival School was doing more of the actual field research of outdoor survival, especially on the primitive end. And Westcott had allowed me, the man who runs Boulder Outdoor Survival School at that time, Dave Westcott, was really listening to me when I said we should step down one more level and see if we can make a class that's about using rock, sticks, and bones to solve our problems, because that's where we come from, and that was my fascination, and he liked that. So he let me go that way. He saw that I was valid and let me go, and good man. And I ended up having a lot of opportunity for about 18 years to really get out there and put some field study into actually doing it rather than like archaeologically imagining what it would be like. And we weren't doing like period correct so much. We didn't care how we looked. It was how functional were we are at creating our own way after we got dropped off. So we're going from now back to then, rather than spending months getting your stuff and your food all ready and then going out and play acting for a month or two or three. So it's about how would you do if you just had to start taking what's available, right? And so we got a lot of time in, got pretty well known. And so they called Westcott, and Westcott said, we don't do, it's in the middle of the winter, somebody out of Texas, we don't know him. And he said, we don't do that, but this David Holladay guy, he's from Tucson, and he spends a lot of time in Mexico with the series on Tiburon Island. And we do trips there, but not this time of year, but maybe he'd take you. So he calls me and says, don't get taken, don't sell yourself short. But there's some guy out of Austin that's asking you to do something with him for some movie. It's probably some B-grade movie maker dude that wants, I said, oh, I don't care. Sure, I'll do it. So I called the guy. Long story short, is I get my check a few weeks later from Universal Studios in advance. Don't have to sign a contract or anything. And I called Westcott and I said, I don't think he's a B-grade movie maker.
Wait a minute.
And so all of a sudden, a really good friend of ours, Steve Watts, and him, they have time all of a sudden.
They're freed up.
So all three of us get to go down there and pick up Bill's stuff and him at the airport in Hermosillo, Mexico, and drive out to the coast. And we find a native man who never gets mentioned, Ernesto Molina Villalobos, who is the real deal. Been living out there his whole life. He was the last person born on Tiburon Island, and everybody else had to move off, and they've made it a game preserve. But it's a beautiful place. Anyway, he's the one that's been teaching us how to live in that environment. And he takes all three of us out, and Bill Broyles. So I'm talking Dave and I and Steve and him are the teaching team. And we teach this Bill Broyles guy some stuff, and he tells us story after story. We tell him story. We're having a blast. And it's Ernesto that's taught us everything we know in that environment. We have a lot of overview stuff, like how people feel when they've been on the trail for a long time when they come back to town. But we didn't know that he wasn't looking for survival skills. He was watching our character and our stories and making us talk a lot, and he got a lot of ideas from us that went directly into the movie.
So not necessarily, not for the skills really at all.
I loved this woman, Gloria Aroshi, and I married her, and she had some kids. I already had kids. I was a single dad. We were single parents. We got together. We're making a family. I'm totally in love with her, and it's falling apart. It's my first time I've ever gotten married. I'm totally in love with her, and she just doesn't seem to be thriving. She doesn't really seem to like me most days. And I'm crybabying at night around the fire. And everybody starts crybabying like guys do at the bar, except for we're not drunk. And eventually we all tell our whole life story and our sadness, because we're out on the trail after work every day around the fire eating clams or whatever we've gathered that day, and fish. And so Bill's collecting those stories and he's putting them into the movie. And so what he does is he eventually tells me, before that comes out 5 years later, you're the main inspiration for this movie.
Wow.
And I'm all excited, and then I watch it and I cry because
Yeah.
it's my broken and messed up life.
Really?
Yeah.
Wow.
And they made
Okay.
it even darker.
Yeah.
You know, like they took all the joyful parts about how being in nature makes you a better person and almost just kind of leaves the guy shredded. But the original screenplay was beautiful. Anyway, it was fun. Turns out he's the guy that did the screenplay for Apollo 13. Which was a really amazing movie.
Right.
So Tom and he were buddies. They went everywhere together with their families and had so that was an amazing experience.